It's inevitable, the historical 100% failure rate of fiat currency.
I would rather die of bad weather than starving to death in a breadline for communism.
People need to get out of fiat now and start using this stuff in a parallel economy. Bitcoin just froze. They just stopped innovating. I mean, there's no way the dollar makes it out alive.
If you ever want out of this plantation, you are not free to leave. Leaving is not free. The number of guests I have interviewed on this show that are either dead or currently in a cage by a government is shockingly high. Especially considering none of my guests have done anything wrong. We just spoke at length with Roger Ver on this channel about his new book. And shortly after the interview goes live, we all get word that he is now in a cage, thanks to the U.S. government that he hasn't been associated with in 10 years. So today we have an expert on the situation with what's going on with Roger, and we're going to get into the details.
From Dallas, Texas, this is Anarchast.
Aaron Day, this is your first time on Anarchast. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time to help us get more familiar with just what has happened to Roger. But first, I would like to focus on you for a little bit, because this is your first time here, and you have been in the libertarian thought space and freedom fighting space for a while, and you've accomplished, you have some accomplishments. You have a resume that I would like to get into. You are an entrepreneur, a husband, a father to two. You're a fellow at the Brownstone Institute. You have messed around with party politics, which we can talk about if you'd like. And you're the author of a new book called The Final Countdown, which is a warning flare fired into the air about central bank digital currencies. Which we can also definitely talk about if we end up having time. So the first question that I always ask first-time guests on the Anarchast is, sir, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, so I started out as an entrepreneur. I dropped out of college when I was 19, started an internet company, sold it, then got involved with venture capital for a short period of time, then started another company in the healthcare space, which was profitable. We had clients in 43 states, and it was destroyed by Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and the Attorney General, Eric Holder, at the time. And so, I mean, I like to say, hell hath no fury like an entrepreneur scorned. And that basically launched me off on what's now been a, almost 20-year crusade. So I started getting involved in activism, moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, and then got involved on the political side, wanting to continue to stop Obamacare, except in this instance at the state level. So I spent a lot of effort trying to stop Obamacare Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire by recruiting candidates, helped to get over 100 candidates elected, ended up primarying a bunch of senators. I even ended up, when I found out that the reason that Republicans in New Hampshire pushed Obamacare Medicaid expansion, it was to protect Kelly Ayotte's U.S. Senate seat. So basically I said, well, if you guys are going to screw with our state for the career of one politician, then I'm going to interfere with her race. So I did. I ran as an independent for U.S. Senate. I cost her U.S. Senate seat. And unfortunately, it didn't have any impact. So unfortunately, even though I followed through and everybody knew what was going on, it didn't change the behavior at the state level. They've continued this. So I exited politics entirely in 2018. I learned about crypto in 2012 from Ian Freeman and Mark Edge on Free Talk Live, and then also from Roger in 2012 at a Free State Project event, Liberty Forum event. And in 2019, I decided to not only exit politics, but exit fiat currency. So I've been living off of crypto, gold and silver exclusively since 2019. So that's kind of the pathway. So having my business destroyed, then trying the political process as aggressively as possible, then realizing there's no hope through that path, and then just exiting and trying to find alternatives through things like crypto and other approaches.
How has the attempt at doing that been going?
It's been okay. I mean, I went extreme. Like I went from living in a 6,000 square foot house to all my possessions fitting in 2 suitcases. Like I did this because I was genuinely concerned about the direction the state was going. This was actually pre-COVID even. It's been difficult though. I will say, specifically in the last 2 years, it's become more difficult to live off of crypto than it was previously. Right, 2019 to 2021 was easier to use crypto for day-to-day transactions. In fact, in New Hampshire has the highest or close to the highest percent per capita usage of crypto in the country. There are numerous stores and restaurants and places that I can go to and use crypto directly. There's a community here. There's a free state community kind of already built in. So it's certainly easier here than in other places. But honestly, when you're using crypto, oftentimes you're not really using it peer to peer. You're buying gift cards. You're buying debit cards. I mean, there's still it's not yet what it's supposed to be, which is peer to peer. It's not what it was. Even the very first time I got Bitcoin in 2012, where it's just, okay, hey, yeah, I can use this directly with no third parties. It's actually, it's become more difficult. And as I've learned, and part of what Roger's book about, there's a reason all this happened. It's intentional. Bitcoin was hijacked to make way for CBDCs, and the government has been aggressively cracking down on exchanges, on local Bitcoins, using KYC and anti-money laundering laws to make it more difficult to use exchanges. So it's been tough, and it's getting more difficult. And in fact,
what specifically? Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
I've actually been moving more into even gold and silver and gold backs, and I've kind of mixed it up. I used to be 90-10 crypto, gold, silver, and now I'm moving towards 50-50, and I'm it's a struggle trying to make all of this work.
What specifically in terms of cryptocurrency has changed in the last couple of years that's made it harder?
Well, actually, the main thing is when I got Bitcoin in 2012, I was using Bitcoin, and I was actually using Bitcoin for political activism. So I formed a super PAC in New Hampshire called Stark 360. We actually raised, at the time, like 20 Bitcoin, and we were paying activists to do put out signs and do all this other stuff. We were paying them in Bitcoin. And we were able to do that because cryptocurrency was fast and cheap. The fees were low. It was actually a better form of money. If you go back to 2012, we didn't have things like Venmo or Zelle or Apple Pay or Google Pay. So in my previous experience having an e-commerce business in the late 90s, I know how painful it is as a merchant to accept credit cards. You have to wait 3 days to get paid. You have to pay, 3.29% of the transaction plus 30 cents. So like immediately when I saw Bitcoin, I was like, wow, this is faster, cheaper. This was a fraction of a cent at the time. Instant, no banks. Wow, this is great. But you move into 2017, all of a sudden there were real adoption was happening. You had companies like Expedia and Microsoft and Steam that were actually taking it directly. But they didn't increase the size of the blocks as Roger discussed and as Satoshi had envisioned. And so it became slow and it became expensive to use. Transactions were nearing $50 and it could take a week or more to complete a transaction. So in short, the downfall began in 2017 when it became too slow and too expensive to use. And then it's been a regulatory issue since then. So now, so since 2017, now it's been, there are 20,000 different cryptos. Which one do you use? How do you get a merchant to use it? Because it's complicated to explain how all the different coins work. And then you have the government trying to shut down specific cryptos through the SEC. And then you have the IRS and others trying to make it hard to buy and sell crypto in any form. So now there's a newer layer of complexity to it.
What would be like a top 3 tools set for somebody that's trying to still use crypto in the modern times? Like, is there a particular exchange that you prefer? Is there a particular website to buy prepaid cards, things like that? Like, what's a small little quick tool set you would recommend?
So on that, so I'm going around the country now doing these 4-hour workshops based on my book. So the first half is about the CBDC threat, and more than the CBDC threat, I also talk about the fact that fiat, the dollar is failing, and it's inevitable. And I talk about the historical 100% failure rate of fiat currency. I mean, there's no way the dollar makes it out alive. No fiat currency makes it out alive. And then the last half, though, is I give people hands-on advice. So everybody in the workshop walks away with a self-custody crypto wallet and a gold back and silver. So I want to empower people. So I will tell you what I'm recommending right now, and then I will tell you what I'm going to be announcing in 2 weeks is an initiative to see if I can get people interested in working on this. Right now, I just recommend something like an Exodus wallet because I'm looking for a multi-coin wallet, and understand the people that I'm talking to, I'm dealing with a lot of boomers. So I just saw a stat last week. Less than 5% of the population is using crypto. So like we're still in the like pre-early adoption stage. And even that 5%, people aren't using it for day-to-day transactions. They're mostly using it as a speculative investment. So
of course it was turned into a joke.
it was turned into a joke. So,
yeah.
So the P2P use case is still wide open. So and as much as I'd like to, I'm shying away from trying to pick one coin. I'm trying to pick coins that are decentralized proof of work, but instead of making it try to force everybody into one, let's go with a multi-coin approach. So I recommend an Exodus wallet. But as an example, in this workshop that I'm doing in San Jose, which is where Roger was born, this Saturday, I'm giving everybody Bitcoin Cash. And in my own experience, living off of crypto, I didn't start out, no one's paying me to promote any crypto. I'm just explaining what out of necessity I ended up using because it's available and easy to use.
Because it actually functions. Yeah.
Because it functions. So more than anything else, I've used Bitcoin Cash. I've also used Monero. I've used Zcash. I've used Litecoin. I've used Ravencoin. But in terms of onboarding somebody new, and if I'm picking one place to start, I'm starting with Bitcoin Cash based on it's decentralized. There's an actual merchant network, there's a partner network, and it has a decent enough market cap where there's buying power associated with it. So that's basically it. And so I'm giving people that. And then if I'm just getting somebody started, then they can actually just buy Bitcoin Cash through the Exodus wallet. Now, so this isn't like they're going all in and buying it. But they can just make a transaction and they can buy some with their debit card. So I'm focusing on what is the simplest thing to get. The use case in my book is targeted around how do we get a boomer with minimal technical expertise to obtain and begin using crypto. That's my challenge, and that's what I'm trying to figure out what the solution set is. Then beyond that, you don't have many choices left. You're down to Coinbase and Kraken, and it's funny when you look at it. All of these exchanges are being sued. I guess even Robinhood today got a Wells notice from the SEC. So realistically, it's not great because you're going to get KYC'd, and I don't really have a good way around that. If this were 10 years ago, I'd say, hey, go to the local meetup and get some Bitcoin. Even ATMs are becoming more difficult. So, I go with use one of these wallets for a small amount, and then, use Coinbase or Kraken, from there. And then depending upon what the situation is, you can, use a debit card. I'm waiting for BitPay to reintroduce their debit card. That was actually frustrating. I've been using the BitPay debit card with BCH for 2-3 years. And then all of a sudden we got 7 days notice because last year when all of those banks went away, the 4 banks that failed, 2 of them were actually competitors to FedNow. And I think it was they were intentionally crashed, Signature Bank and Silvergate Bank. But along with that whole process, the bank that BitPay was working with was shut down. So I got 7 days notice to, that I could no longer use that card. So I do these workshops, but at the end of the workshop, I say, listen, I'm telling you what I'm doing now, but keep in mind, I've been doing this for a long time, and what I'm doing today is not the same as I was doing 12 months ago or 24 months ago. So I'm keeping people up to date through my podcast and my website as to what to do. And again, I'm looking more at gold and silver because there's one of the frustrating things is it's like Bitcoin, BTC just froze. They just stopped innovating, right? They're like, well, we're not going to... No technology. I've been a technology entrepreneur for 30 years. I'm not familiar with any technology since I've been alive where when it scales, it becomes more expensive to use and slower. That's just not how technology works. It's mind-boggling how the whole system works. And so they have
what happens as a technology entrepreneur? Yeah. Let me ask you a question and then I'll tell you about myself. What happens to all technologies that do not iterate?
they fail.
I've been saying that for the past 2 months on this channel. I'm also a technology entrepreneur in the power sports, marine, automotive space. I've been a coder all of my life, and it's just clear as day to me that when a technology is not iterating, if it's not solving its problems, it is beginning to rot away and fail. And we're staring at the biggest version 1 catastrophe that is not being repaired and iterated and improved. I'm worried about all the people that have so much of their finances invested in this. I literally call Bitcoin legacy technology at this point. Like, there are better versions that resolve a lot of these issues. So it's just hilarious to hear you say the exact same thing that I've been telling people. Anyway, yeah, it's so obvious.
Well, so I'm actually putting together in the presentation. I'm kind of like I've put other comparisons to other technology. I put some memes out. I actually went through when I first read Roger's book. I was putting some other comparisons together, and again in 2012, Venmo, PayPal existed, but Zelle, none of these things existed. And then you look at the growth, and you look at these Bitcoin people, and they say, well, it takes thousands of years. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's like you can't compare the adoption of BTC to gold when you're living in a world where you have technology companies building new technology. And by the way, they managed to get out innovated by gold, right? Like as a medium of exchange.
Can you hold that up?
A gold back. This is one. Yeah. This is 1/1000th of an ounce of gold, right? This is about $4.50 worth of gold. It's a beautiful bill. You almost don't even want to spend these things because they look like artwork. I can now spend gold. I can spend silver. I can spend 1/10 of an ounce, or I have 1/5 of an ounce rounds now. I can use gold and silver for commerce, because so far, the argument before was, well, how are you going to go? We're going to go shave off gold when you go to the store and buy things? No, they innovated. So it's a better medium of exchange than BTC. It's so frustrating to see this. And so now I'm kind of like, I'm from a technology perspective, I mentioned what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to do a podcast in a couple of weeks where what I'm calling for is that we develop an open source multi-coin wallet and an open source multi-coin point of sale system that can also take gold and silver, that is open source. And again, I don't know how we're going to quite fund it yet, but the idea here is, if we don't have better products for people to use, if a boomer can't use this, like the Lightning Network, the thing is, this idea that you have to be a techie to use money is bizarre, and almost the fetish of, if you're not running your own Lightning Network, or if you can't operate like this, it's like, it's money. People should be able to use this to trade. There should be no prerequisite of technical knowledge to use money for the purpose of trade. And so I think if we could come up with an open source solution that wasn't centralized, that didn't use the app store, that was easy to use, then we might actually have a chance. But we need to be looking at this as like, we have to compete with central banks. We have to compete with technology companies. And by the way, they've got a monopoly power, control over this stuff to begin with. Like we're behind. We're in the bottom of the ninth inning of a baseball game. We're down 100-1. They control the umpire. Their players aren't drug tested, and we don't even know we're in a game. That's like how bad this is at this point. So I'm going to put out this thing, I've talked to some devs and some designers, but to see if we can maybe come up with a simple multi-coin solution so that we can offer something. Because when they roll out CBDC, it's going to be in an emergency, just like the Patriot Act, just like TARP, just like the CARES Act. And we can't stop the fact that there's going to be an emergency, manufactured or otherwise. We can't stop that the reaction is going to be fear.
Let's do this. Let's do a deep dive into the Rogerverse situation and go through everything that's happened there. Then let's circle back around and let's hear what the current state of CBDCs are, and then we can wrap up. So we both interviewed Roger recently about his book on our respective shows. By the way, we'll have the links to all of his socials and podcasts in the description of this video for you. So make sure to go check that out and subscribe to his stuff. And then right after we talk to him, he gets nabbed by the same law enforcement that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, nabbed another past guest that I've spoken with, John McAfee. Is Roger in the same prison right now that John was suicided in?
I'm trying to actually get the specific information because I've been digging into that. But what I can say, because I think he was in two different prisons. He was in one prison, and then when he was, they moved him on when he was extradited. I think he actually switched at one point. But I'm going to assume that he probably is in a similar place. And I was looking at McAfee's situation. So McAfee was actually in this Spanish prison for 8 months. The first 2.5 months, he was, they went through the internal process, and the Spanish court decided, yes, we're going to extradite you. And then the other 5.5 months was McAfee fighting the extradition. So it was appealing to the Supreme Court and going through a couple of levels there, and then he ultimately lost. And then within 1 day of losing his appeal on the extradition, he whatever happened to him. So, because I've been looking, because part of this is if United States, and you probably, it sounds like you're in the same situation as well. We have friends that get arrested all the time, and usually they get bail, right? So I'm kind of like waiting for, okay, well, Roger's going to emerge and he'll be fine. He's not going to remain in jail throughout this entire process. And it turns out that that's not the case in Spain. So that becomes, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, wow, Roger could actually be stuck there for 8 months unless he chooses not to fight the extradition. But that's pretty alarming to me in and of itself. And then I was actually thinking, and I've been digging back more. There's more to this case even before this. This has been going on since like 2021.
Okay, let's back way up then, and let's start at the beginning. Yeah. So 10 years ago, he left the U.S. and he started attempting to what do they call? Not revoking your citizenship, relinquishing citizenship. What do they call it?
Yeah, he I think relinquish. There is another word, and I'm trying to think of what it is. It'll pop up.
This is his indictment that I have on the screen for everybody watching. Just so you know, we have this is his indictment. I'll be scrolling through it while Aaron talks here.
So I found some other documents that predate these that are now I don't know for sure that they're Roger, but there was actually a Supreme Court document docket going back to a grand jury from 2022. So this case has been in the courts for quite some time. In fact, it's already, an element of this has already gone to the Supreme Court. Basically, Roger was, the court wanted to get access to privileged information from Roger's attorney. And usually this information is covered under attorney-client privilege. And I guess there was a whole series of legal back and forth on whether or not, well, how do you deal with advice from your counsel that was legal versus non-legal? And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided not to even weigh in on it, and Roger lost, assuming it's the same lawsuit. And so now here we are with this. So this has been going on, this entire case has been going on since 2021. So... Okay. Just for background reference, it looks like. So, All right, here we are.
Expatriation. That's what they call it, I think.
Yep.
All right, so he started the process in 2014, according to this indictment. Oh, this is something I did not know, and this is an important argument for all of us sort of anarchists here to remember to bring up when you're talking to somebody about liberty and freedom and self-ownership and non-aggression and how the government has no just authority to coerce everybody in the area, and the statist replies to you by saying something along the lines of, well, if you don't like it, if you don't consent to this government, you can always just leave. Why don't you go somewhere else? Oh, wait, you are not free to do so. And here is the proof right here. And this is kind of important and a little bit mind-blowing. Specifically, all of a covered expatriate's property was treated as having been sold on the day before the expatriation date for its fair market value, referred to as a constructive sale, and any gain arising from that fake, didn't actually happen, constructive sale is required to be taken into account for that taxable year and was subject to tax, which is referred to as an exit tax. So if you ever won out of this plantation, they add up the value of everything you own, pretend you sold it, and then tax the gain that you didn't actually make because you didn't actually sell anything as if you did. How insidious and vile! You are not free to leave. Leaving is not free. I wanted to point that out from this. How do you want to go through this story? I'll kind of pitch it to you, and you can grab the reins here. Where are we right now?
Well, I'll just say, I mean, I put together a little outline from this, and it's
go for it.
So basically, in the complaint, they just basically say that, you know, Roger has two companies one called Memory Dealers and one called Agile Star that have been acquiring Bitcoins throughout the years, going back, you know, all the way to, you know, actually 2010. And it also talks about the fact that he made a donation to 501c3 charity, which I believe was fee. There's public information on that. At the time, it was a big deal. I think he gave, I don't know, I want to say it was $250,000 or $1 million worth of Bitcoin way, way, way back. And they actually referenced that in the complaint. And so the complaint is all about basically saying that he didn't report all of his Bitcoin. They were trying to say that, you know, he didn't report, but there are issues around what was his personal Bitcoin versus what was in these various companies. And there were legitimate issues surrounding this. And so Roger hired, I think, one or two different law firms. And he hired a couple of different accounting firms to try to help him before he left figure out what the proper valuation was. So Roger didn't just leave. He paid an exit tax. He paid what he thought was the right exit tax after consulting with a couple of different legal firms and a couple of different accounting firms. So from Roger's perspective, it's not like he just dashed. I mean, and again, this was 2014. So they waited then 7 years to pursue this. So
and
why would you wait?
He paid over $3 million when he left in taxes.
Yeah. He paid the taxes, and then they wait 7 years. Which, by the way, I thought there was some situation where the IRS couldn't come after you a certain period of time. So I don't know if this fit in like six years and 364 days, or I don't know what that's all about. They tend to like to butt right up against the statute of limitations. But I mean, to wait all of this time to do this. And then I actually was just thinking about this because when I talked to Roger was in South Korea, then he was going to Dubai. And because when we were scheduling the meeting, it was a whole bunch of time zone issues stuff. It wasn't publicly announced that he was even going to be in Spain. So, you know, having had enough friends nabbed and everything, like there's quite a bit of work that has to go into figuring out where someone's going to be to nab them. So the fact that he wasn't at a public event and they were able to coordinate with the law enforcement in Spain to pick him up on a weekend tells you that they're putting a significant amount of resources behind this for a lot for, you know, an alleged $50 million made up back of the envelope, $50 million for taxes. This has nothing to do with just taxes. I don't either. I'm sure the feds are in on this now.
Yeah, right. Okay. So another thing that I highlighted looking through this indictment was the clustering analysis. And this is something that not enough people really feel. They don't grok the situation with cryptocurrencies that are not private, like Bitcoin. And there is no hiding when they can use these deep analyses, these cluster analyses, and very soon artificially intelligent analyses of the blockchain activity to determine exactly who owns what and when and where. You have no privacy when using these currencies, unless you take steps, which they're now punishing. And I mean, what was it? The Samurai wallet was just shut down. And they were one of the few, I think they were one of only two real providers of any modicum of privacy on the Bitcoin blockchain. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, and Tornado Cash, there's a Tornado Cash lawsuit ongoing as well, which I just read the government's defense on that, and that, you know, basically they're going to call everybody a money transmitter. I mean, they're trying to come up with, they're going after self custody next. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very clear that that's the case, but yeah, they're throwing people in jail and they are shutting down coin mixing services all over the place. And yeah, a lot of people don't realize, look, it is a public ledger. And I know people were confused in the Liberty community early on. I think even Ross Ulbricht thought it was encrypted and anonymous. People didn't realize it was pseudonymous, and that at some point people were going to be able to do this kind of chain analysis. And by the way, I mean, you mentioned earlier, where do you recommend people buy this stuff? I mean, there aren't many options, but it was just announced last week that Coinbase is working in conjunction with the IRS on implementing AI technology to analyze people's trades. I mean, this is so this stuff is right out there on a distributed ledger with, tens of thousands of copies of it all over the world with your financial transactions. And so that's absolutely going on here too. Although it would be worth looking up to see if Craig Wright has been claiming any of Roger's addresses. If you followed his case at all, Craig has made all kinds of claims about owning addresses that are clearly not his, and people have actually signed and said, Craig Wright's a fraud on these addresses.
On addresses he claimed as his? Oh, no, I haven't followed it.
This is the most wild thing ever. So the Mt. Gox hack, right? The huge hack, and there's one address that has 80,000 Bitcoin in it, right? So Craig Wright flees Australia, goes to England, and then he gets a loan from Calvin Ayre, and he uses a fake paper wallet with that same address on it. He literally forged a paper wallet and got Calvin Ayre to give him money, a loan, based on an address that was used in the Mt. Gox hack. So he submitted all these, I'm actually serious about this. I should check this, because these Roger addresses, because what he did is he just went through and he took rich list addresses, right? He was trying to make this claim, I have 1.1 million and all these fake organizations. And so I wouldn't be surprised to find out that these addresses that Roger has, Craig's also listed, and maybe he can use that as justification for, hey, wait, these aren't mine. Maybe these are Craig Wright's addresses. Maybe use this, do a little jujitsu on that side.
And the only defense he would have would be to say that he perjured himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no! Yeah, I looked into that enough to know it was quite a clown show. I don't have the full I don't have the full timeline on the Craig Wright thing.
Well, it's wild. That's a separate conversation. But anyway, yeah.
Okay, so current state of the world. Roger Ver is likely in a Spanish prison for months until if he decides to fight the extradition. If not, then he'll just be extradited quickly, and then I assume be able to bond or bail out once in the U.S.
I mean, normally, yes, but the question is, look at CZ. I mean, I guess they're already trying to label him this, tax fraud, and they're clearly doing this to make an example of him. So who knows what they're actually going to do? Normally, if you were following the law and he had normal rights, yeah, he'd be out on bail. But I think they might try to fabricate something. The question is, what do they want? Do they want money? Like, what do they really want? I mean, if it's a matter of $50 million, most people, or do they want him in jail? I find it very suspicious that it's like 2 weeks after his book is out and this happens. Yeah. I think they don't want this book out because this book, it is, and we'll talk about it more later, but this is tied to CBDCs. All of this, the hijacking of BTC and all of this crackdown is all about bringing in CBDCs. And so I think that they want to discredit Roger and stop him from talking about this, because as you follow more on what's in his book and connect a few more dots, you understand what this is all about. And the government and central banks do not want this story out there.
Well, a terrible way to discredit somebody in the Liberty community is to accuse them of tax fraud. I mean, that's a promotion.
It is within this community, but then, so it'll be interesting to see as I do more of these workshops. So outside of, because, so I actually, when I do my talk, I have these different sections, and I ask people at the beginning, more people have heard of Sam Bankman-Fried than Satoshi Nakamoto. So I'll do a show of hands. Have you heard of like this? So when you get out of libertarian circles, when you get out of crypto, we're talking like 99% of the population. They've never heard of Satoshi. They've heard of SBF. They don't know you can use crypto for transactions, and they think of it mostly as a speculative asset. That is the general state of knowledge. And so this kind of stuff can be effective because if somebody's sitting here saying, well, I don't like the dollar. I know the dollar's going the wrong way, but should I buy crypto? Well, I don't know. This guy's a tax fraud and that SBF and everything else. And they've done a really good job of creating. Some of them are villain. I mean, in the case of SBF, I mean, that guy, actually is laundering money for politicians. That's a separate situation. But in Roger's case, this might have somewhat of a chilling effect, and we can't let that happen. I mean, I guess that's my takeaway from this is we have to amplify what's going on here, keep explaining what's going on with Roger's case, and keep pushing peer-to-peer digital cash as a way to fight back. Because otherwise, if it has a chilling effect, then it's actually effective, and we don't want that, in my opinion.
Right. Tell me what the state of affairs is. Let's get into CBDCs. So when I first heard of the government going CBDC, I was skeptical, and I kind of still am. It seems like they have a much better system now that's much more sort of off the books and hard to track and sort of subjective, and they can print stuff without us ever knowing already. So why do they need to wrap everybody into this new complicated technology that's probably going to cause them a lot more problems than what they already have? But the government's incompetent, so whatever they do is just probably going to be terrible and inefficient and garbage anyway. So is this really a threat? That would be kind of my current position. What do you think? What's your thoughts? So that would have been my thought. That was my thinking probably in 2022. And then when I started digging into this, I actually ran for president to raise awareness on this issue. I got so freaked out about what I found when I did the research on this. First of all, we're like 45 years into a 50-year plan to move towards one world government. So when you see stuff like the World Health Organization and these pandemic alliances, like we're giving up our sovereignty and we're moving more and more to these global organizations. And at the end of this, there's one global currency, digital currency, and it's actually backed by carbon credits. This goes all the way back to the technocracy movement from the 1930s. And so there is an overarching thing. While governments are incompetent, this is all a top-down situation. So you have what I call organized incompetence. And so you have most of the people working at lower levels not knowing what the people above them are doing, but the people at the very top are kind of like pulling the strings. So for instance, you have a group like the Trilateral Commission that has infiltrated the governments of North America, Europe, and Asia from the top down. Like, for instance, under the Carter administration, all but one of his cabinet members was a Trilateral Commission member. Every administration since Carter has had multiple members of the Trilateral Commission on the cabinet, and they've done this and they've infiltrated this in Europe and in Asia, and they have a stated mission of pushing towards globalism. They actually wrote the 1972 the UN New International Economic Order. And so the Trilateral Commission wrote that in 1972, and that became the basis of what we now have as the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. So first I'd say, and I would not have been saying this 3 years ago. So I put this all in the book, and it's actually public information at this point. It's just that usually you get pegged to conspiracy theories. So then I started looking at. Do you have the book with you? Can you hold it up so we can see what it looks like?
Yeah, I can. It's The Final Countdown: Crypto, Gold, Silver, and the People's Last Stand Against Tyranny by Central Bank Digital Currencies. And so I talk about that in here. So then I started looking at CBDCs itself. And this is part of my frustration with crypto, because we already talked about the fact that traditional finance has out-innovated with Venmo and Google Pay and soon to be X payments. But now let's look at what's happened with CBDCs. In 2020, there were 35 countries that were at the stage of researching CBDCs. Just researching. The only country that really had a CBDC at that point, and they started theirs in 2014, was China, and they were in the early stages of rolling that out. So 35 countries in 2020. Now, today, in 2024, there are 134 countries at various stages of rolling out CBDCs. There are 1.3 billion CBDC accounts globally. There are more CBDC accounts already today than there are decentralized crypto accounts. This has happened in the last.
So a CBDC already exists somewhere in the world? Like a government has already flipped to it? Is that what you just said?
8 countries have already implemented it. Now,
really? What countries?
Most of them are in the Eastern Caribbean. You have Nigeria, you have China, and then you actually have India rolling out an e-rupee, and then so those 8 kind of are the ones that have already rolled it out. But when you start talking about pilots, the U.S. has done 3 successful CBDC pilots.
Now, are these blockchain based? And if so, why would they use the blockchain technology for this when it's like go ahead.
This is wild, and this is why, like, my next talk is DEF CON 1, because I'm like, all right, I ran for president, I wrote this book, but when I say this, I'm like, this is the number one threat, but it ties into Roger's book, which is why I was talking to Roger. In 2017, let's look at what happened. They hijacked BTC, right? So what happened? You had Blockstream, and you had these groups coming in. Actually, it wasn't even Blockstream. At that point in time, it was MIT Multimedia Lab. So let me take one step back here. So for a while, you had this Bitcoin Foundation, which was a community-led effort that Roger was one of the 5 founders of, and you had Gavin Andreessen and a lot of leaders from across a broad spectrum of the Bitcoin space, OGs involved. And they were raising money to fund development. They had some internal issues in 2015, and then all of a sudden, a new group came in and provided the funding. That group was the MIT Multimedia Lab and the Digital Currency Initiative, run by a guy named Joy Ito. Joy Ito also started a venture capital group called Digital Garage. Now, this is the mind-blowing part of this. And again, all this is publicly available information. Joy Ito funded the development of SegWit, funded the development of Lightning, and funded all 3 US CBDC pilots. And this is the piece that people, so even when I was talking to Roger about this, because most people are looking at this as, well, there were these block size wars, and then people haven't been looking at, well, why did we have these block size wars? Literally, Jeffrey Epstein did an interview on crypto in 2017, and he said, Bitcoin will never be a currency, it's a store of value. I mean, there's a much longer quote about it, but that's essentially what he had to say. Jeffrey Epstein funded MIT Multimedia Lab and also funded Digital Garage, the private venture. And in fact, Joy Ito had to resign as chair of the MIT Multimedia Lab because of the Epstein Association. So we literally have a situation where MIT came in, they decided not to increase the blocks. The new people that were funding the development funded SegWit and Lightning, and then funded all the CBDCs. But the connection doesn't end there. There's one guy in particular named Corey Fields, who was a developer for SegWit, developer for Lightning, and he's a co-author of the US retail CBDC pilot called Project Hamilton. So now I'm looking at this, I'm like, all right, this is frightening. So now let's look at the pilot itself. The first 2 phases of the US retail CBDC pilot ran from 2020 to 2022. The system can do 1.7 million transactions per second.
How? On a blockchain?
So, I mean, it's not a permissionless blockchain, but it can do 1.7 million transactions per second. Now, they concluded the pilot by saying, well, we have a few things that we have to sort out technically, but largely what's next is we have to work out the legality and the marketing before we roll this out. I've talked to developers that currently work on this. So a lot of people think, because you go to the website, it's like, well, they ended the pilot in 2022. They didn't end the pilot. They just stopped reporting on what they're doing. They're now up to almost 1.9 million transactions per second. They've worked out what the other details are. And now this same group is like working with Germany and other countries on their CBDCs. Now, that's one of the US pilots. The second is called Project Cedar, and Project Cedar is a wholesale CBDC for, cross and for banks. Hive, most troubling, and kind of ties into this idea that there's a global movement towards one world currency. This is something called Regulated Liability Network, RLN. And people can Google this. There are white papers up there. This pilot is a collaboration between the MIT Multimedia Lab, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the Bank of International Settlements, and a bunch of large banks in the New York area. The idea behind Regulated Liability Network is it's one ledger that will track all CBDCs and all other digital assets. So in other words, you will have to register in KYC all of your assets and through this regulated liability network, and then everything will be tracked. And there will be multiple organizations that can monitor, censor, and track transactions. And so, for instance, like right now, when you buy a publicly traded stock, you don't actually own the stock certificate. There's this intermediary company called DTCC, which literally physically owns all the stock certificates, right? So I got involved early with a blockchain called Ravencoin because I like the idea of tokenization. And the idea is, we could tokenize shares. We could get rid of DTCC. DTCC is involved in regulated liability network. They're already building out a model where DTCC still is involved. So they're tokenizing shares, tokenizing real world assets, putting them on this ledger linked to CBDC with the same intermediaries. It's actually going to be more expensive than the system that we have now. And it completely defeats the purpose of blockchain and peer-to-peer technology. But nevertheless, that's the third pilot. And the most recent conversation that I had with a dev that worked on this said when they roll out the US CBDC, it's going to be in conjunction with this regulated liability network. So I'm very concerned about it because the technology's already been built. And we're really, when I ran for president, I talked to like Vivek read my book and then he talked to Trump about CBDCs. There's no political solution to this, but I talked to Ted Cruz and some of the other people in Congress. Like Ted Cruz has put a bill up twice, and all his bill says is we don't want the Federal Reserve to be able to act unilaterally and create a CBDC without the approval of Congress, which they shouldn't be able to do anyway based on the Constitution. And he couldn't even get a vote on that bill. There is no real resistance in the United States Congress. So just as we got the Patriot Act 45 days after 9/11, we got TARP 18 days after Lehman Brothers collapsed, and we got the CARES Act 16 days after COVID was declared a pandemic on a voice vote. That's exactly how they'll bring in CBDCs. And right now, we're already under an executive order 14067, which Biden signed on March the 9th, 2022, which authorized the United States to explore CBDC while taking a whole of government approach to regulating digital assets. So when you wonder why Ian Freeman is in prison, why they're cracking down on Roger, why they're going after mixing services, everything that's going on is actually, it's in writing. It's government policy. It's in this executive order, and they have been following through. So to me, when I see this crackdown, I'm looking at this, it's like, this stuff isn't really a threat, right? Less than 5% of people are using it. DeFi is not a threat. Like it's not like the dollar is being, supplanted for retail transactions. They're not worried about. It's not a threat right now. They need to shut all of the doors so that they can bring in CBDC. So I believe that this might actually happen before this election cycle, which is why I've been out banging the drums on why it's important that people understand this. And more importantly, why people need to get out of fiat now and start using this stuff in a parallel economy, because that's actually the only shot we have. We can't vote our way out. We can only non-comply our way out. And so this has basically been the whole purpose of my existence for the past year and a half.
Okay. I have a couple, there's a couple holes left in the plot for me. One of them is why a blockchain tech? It seems like they could achieve the exact same effect because they already have all digital US dollars pretty much as spied on and locked down and auditable and freezable as they would be able to do with a digital currency. Minus cash. So they could just make the existing USD infrastructure into this tyrannical situation by just banning cash, or whatever you'd call it, demonetizing. I forget what they did in India, where they all the denominations under a certain number were just no longer money. And it seems like they could back their way into that much easier, faster, and have the same end result. Why the baggage of blockchain? The only superpower of blockchain is being decentralized and unregulatable when done correctly. I don't get why they're going with this tech.
I think they're doing it for trackability and for control. I mean, and for programmability, because ultimately this gets tied into social credit systems. This gets tied into, when you look at what's happened in China. And I have my whole intro chapter of my book, which you can read for free on the Brownstone at brownstone.org, kind of paints what the dystopian scenario looks like in the future. But all you have to do is look at what China has today. China has a CBDC. They have a social credit score, right? So right now in China, they track everything that you do. They can track if you cheat in a video game. They track if you don't visit your elderly parents enough. There are 23 million people in China that are already blacklisted based on the social credit system, which means they have reduced access to transportation, healthcare, and everything else. And remember, from once you understand the technocracy aspect of this, the actual fear that they're using to put in place this move to this centralized one world government thing is actually, it's climate change and its energy credits. So they're doing this to push to a system where they have a digital currency that's tied to a system that tracks your behavior based on your carbon output. And they need a more programmable solution for that. This is why ESG was first, right? This is why ESG has been the big push. This is why I think even 2 weeks ago, Biden said he might declare a climate emergency. And when you look at what's going on with the WHO, I just saw today, they may be able to say that climate is a health issue and use the WHO Pandemic Alliance as a way to exercise control over nations and more erosion. So it really is about this creating a digital currency that ultimately can track all behavior that's tied to this artificial scarcity-based climate model. And that is what this cult is pushing for. So, I mean, there's plenty of evidence to kind of push that. So they need more programmability. And again, look at it in terms of you want a new system because you're now trying to digitize all real world assets and put those on a ledger and then have that matched with CBDC. So now you can track and control everything. I mean, it's even worse than just controlling money. It's actually digitizing and controlling all assets that exist in the world. And that is the level of control that they're moving towards. And that's the level of control that China's already implemented. So a lot of times people say to me, oh, that'll never happen here, or it can't happen here because, the US is too big. And it's like, they've already done it in China. And this idea that China is our enemy, if China's our enemy, why did we spend 2 decades working on bioweapons research with them? I mean, COVID came about as part of a 2-decade long. This is why I go back to this. The governments have been infiltrated from the top down, and we're sitting here supposed to believe in these manufactured conflicts, right? It's the U.S. versus China, the U.S. versus Russia. In the meantime, they're developing bioweapons. We get half of our AI surveillance technology from China. Why would we get that technology from our mortal enemy, right? It doesn't make any sense unless you weren't actually concerned about the national sovereignty and there was something else going on kind of behind the scenes. And that's what I think is happening here. So
I was wondering how they were going to go ahead. Yeah.
So that's where we are. And of these 134 CBDC pilots, most of them use they're using like Hyperledger. They're using, I mean, there's a common set of technologies that they're using. And, I actually talked to some people in Nigeria when they implemented that. I was on a Twitter space. They're like, Aaron, why did we implement this? Nobody in Nigeria wanted it. In fact, we're not even set up to be able to handle it. And I said, well, the way the developing nation works is the World Bank and the IMF come in with, they already have toolkits. They've already developed CBDC toolkits. The UN, the Bank of International Settlements, World Bank, and IMF have created these toolkits to come into countries and basically push this technology. So it was they used the funding, they used the carrot of funding to basically force Nigeria to take this CBDC, which the rollout was a disaster, but it didn't go away. They're still tweaking it, and they haven't given up on it, even in Nigeria, even though people were rioting in the streets and burning things down when they realized that no longer did they have access to cash. So this is highly coordinated. The developing nations are getting it through the World Bank and the IMF, but all G7 countries are working on CBDCs, and they're all working on this interoperability component too. I mean, the UK has a regulated liability network too. So they're actually developing different regulated liability networks. So ledgers of ledgers that then connect with each other. And the end goal of that, as you can see, is that those are the steps that you would take if ultimately you wanted to be able to unify around a one global digital currency.
Oh, YouTube, you silly goose. You took my video and you gave it a snooze. You said it's too hot, too spicy, oh, too crude. But you know what, YouTube, you're just a prude. Censorship. Oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. You're a pain in our ass and a thorn in our side. YouTube, you're a digital dictator in disguise. And you say my content's not safe for work. Well, YouTube, you're just a digital jerk. You're a mental prison guard and you're always on patrol. But my tech bro, you're just a control freak troll. Oh, censorship. Oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. Oh, YouTube, listen up, you digital clown. Get your act together, stop keeping us down. You're not the king of the digital world, you bitch. Oh, YouTube, you silly goose. You took my video and you gave it a snooze. You said it's too hot, too spicy, oh, too crude. But you know what, YouTube, you're just a prude. Censorship. Oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. You're a pain in our ass and a thorn in our side. YouTube, you're a digital dictator in disguise. And you say my content's not safe for work. Well, YouTube, you're just a digital jerk. You're a mental prison guard and you're always on patrol. But my tech bro, you're just a control freak troll. Oh, censorship. Oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. Oh, YouTube, listen up, you digital clown. Get your act together, stop keeping us down. You're not the king of the digital world, you bitch. Oh, YouTube, you silly goose. You took my video and you gave it a snooze. You said it's too hot, too spicy, oh, too crude. But you know what, YouTube, you're just a prude. Censorship. Oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. You're a pain in our ass and a thorn in our side. YouTube, you're a digital dictator in disguise. And you say my content's not safe for work. Well, YouTube, you're just a digital jerk. You're a mental prison guard and you're always on patrol. But my tech bro, you're just a control freak troll. Oh, censorship. Oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. Oh, YouTube, listen up, you digital clown. Get your act together, stop keeping us down. You're not the king of the digital world, you bitch. Oh, YouTube, you silly goose. You took my video and you gave it a snooze. You said it's too hot, too spicy, oh, too crude. But you know what, YouTube, you're just a prude. Censorship. Oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. You're a pain in our ass and a thorn in our side. YouTube, you're a digital dictator in disguise. And you say my content's not safe for work. Well, YouTube, you're...
Guys, I'm going to have to censor the fuck out of this entire talk on YouTube. So there's probably been a lot of black boxes and muted audio on the YouTube version of this video. Just go watch it on Odysee, where you should have been watching it in the first place. That will be where the uncensored one is. But anyway, so like we saw with...
Oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. Oh, YouTube, listen up, you digital clown. Get your act together, stop keeping us down. You're not the king of the digital world, you bitch. Oh, YouTube, you silly goose. You took my video and you gave it a snooze. You said it's too hot, too spicy, oh, too crude. But you know what, YouTube, you're just a prude. Censorship, oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. You're a pain in our ass and a thorn in our side. YouTube, you're a digital dictator in disguise. And you say my content's not safe for work. Well, YouTube, you're just a digital jerk. You're a mental prison guard and you're always on patrol. But my tech bro, you're just a control freak troll. Oh, censorship, oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. Oh, YouTube, listen up, you digital clown. Get your act together, stop keeping us down. You're not the king of the digital world, you bitch. Oh, YouTube, you silly goose. You took my video and you gave it a snooze. You said it's too hot, too spicy, oh, too crude. But you know what, YouTube, you're just a prude. Censorship, oh, censorship. You're like a bad case of hemorrhoids. You're a pain in our ass and a thorn in our side. YouTube, you're a digital dictator in disguise. And you say my content's not safe.
There's very much a technocratic element to this new BTC. So,
is there anything else that you would like to bring up or chat about?
Well, I would just say the urgency on this, because I haven't talked to too many people that are aware of the fact that we've done these 3 CBDC pilots. Your audience is more aware of what's going on the crypto side, but once you understand the CBDC part and the executive order, you understand why we're having all of the crackdown. I think this is in prison. I think I interviewed a guy last week named Steve Narioff, who was involved early with Ethereum. Actually developed the first security token. He developed the first utility token. He developed the ICO concept. And he didn't like what was going on with Ethereum because there was some alleged corruption with the head of the SEC and everything else. And so to shut him up, the DOJ manufactured an extortion case against him. He had 12 FBI agents break into his house, arrest him, throw him in a van, and they basically showed him a list of pro-liberty crypto people and said, unless we get indictments on this, you're never going to see your children again.
Jesus.
And so I had him on my show, and because what I'm trying to say to the liberty community is there's more going on here. This isn't just like one-off, oh, they don't like this freedom stuff. There is a coordinated effort to go after all of the pro-liberty crypto people and to shut all of it down as quickly as possible. And they're trying to do it because they already have CBDCs waiting. And I think that the prospect of Biden, losing is probably going to even accelerate their plans further. So we're one cyber attack, one terrorist attack, one Kent State type made up thing on a college campus away from them rolling it out. And they will use money laundering and terrorism as the rationalization, and it will get bipartisan support in Congress. So I'm actually not saying, don't call your congressman. I remember when this new NSA, enhanced power thing came up, and Edward Snowden was like trying to encourage people to call your congressman. And I'm like, unless you've got blackmail footage or a large bag of cash to bribe them, no one cares about your phone call. This isn't Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Those days are over. That's a movie. So
how naive of it was him to even think that was a thing that would do anything. You'd think Snowden
that's wild.
of anybody would know better.
Yep. So what I'm doing is I'm going around the country. I'm doing these workshops. I'm going to do a thing at the Libertarian Party thing. There's an Enemies of the State event going on. I'm sponsoring Roger Ver. They're celebrating Snowden, Julian Assange, Ian Freeman, Ross Ulbricht, and Roger. And I'm going to introduce Roger, the Roger piece of this. And from my perspective, the best thing that we can do to honor these guys is spread peer-to-peer digital cash and get people out of the system. Stop using these dollars. And if we stop using the dollar, then we can halt CBDCs, stop World War III, and end the Fed. That's the only way we can actually do these things. We can't vote our way out.
Is there anything else, any other calls to actions that we'd like to put out there for the viewers that want to help Roger in some way?
I would say, so follow me on Twitter, at Aaron R. Day. I've created a group on there called Free Roger. There's a community on Twitter called Free Roger. We have about almost 300 people there. And this is where we're sharing up-to-date information on what's going on with Roger and trying to get access to people all over the place. So I've had people that have contacted me. Somebody from Spain contacted me and said that one thing that we might be able to do is work through churches to get books and other materials to Roger while he's in prison in Spain. So I'm trying to follow up and get more information on that. So far, all we've gotten is a very brief statement from Roger's lawyer saying that he's in good spirits, but we haven't gotten anything more than that. There's kind of a complete shortfall of information. But I know that through this community, people are writing letters to the IRS, people are writing letters to the DOJ. So this is what the best that we're doing to kind of stay on top of that. And then I'm also going to post information about this Enemies of the State event that's going on in Washington, D.C. on May the 24th. And then we're going to take it from there. But we have to remain highly vigilant on this because this stuff can wither away. And I truly believe this is all to have a chilling effect on Roger. I think they don't want this book to make waves. I think that they don't want people even thinking about the idea of peer-to-peer digital cash because 95% of the population doesn't even think about it that way. So I don't think that it's an accident that this happened. So, to properly honor Roger, I think we should accelerate adoption, but then also we'll stay on top of whatever's going on with his court case and try to expose the inevitable miscarriage of justice that's going on there. And we didn't talk about this, but they're claiming he had 131,000 Bitcoin. So what they're claiming in the case is that he had 131,000 Bitcoin, and they were basically saying, well, you have to sell whatever part. They made up a dollar amount that each Bitcoin was worth, and you have to pay taxes on that. Well, if you go back and look, I looked at this, going back to 2014, the average daily volume of Bitcoin was 40 to 60,000 Bitcoin worth. So literally, Roger could not have possibly sold his Bitcoin. It would have crashed the market. He could have sold all of his Bitcoin and would not have been able to satisfy the tax liability. So this entire case is completely made up and punitive, and I think designed to have a chilling effect on what Roger stands for.
Well, Aaron, I appreciate it. Thank you for everybody. Go check out his Twitter group. We'll have links to his socials, his website, his book. We'll have all that in the description for you for this video. If you are running one of your seminars in Dallas, make sure to let us know, and we'll show up there with a camera and maybe cover it and experience the seminar for people and maybe see what that's like. And I guess we'll leave it there. Aaron, this has been a fun show. It's been pleasant meeting you. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for following the Roger situation. And if there's any new developments, you have an open invitation to come back and give us updates. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Peace, love, and anarchy.